Charles Leclerc just told Ferrari what no one expected. I want out. And it's not just frustration, it's rebellion. Why is Ferrari's own golden child turning his back on the team? What did he see behind the scenes? We're diving into the internal drama that exploded after Hamilton's early DNF in Brazil and how it became the breaking point for Leclerc. Because when one legend is abandoned and the other refuses to be the next victim, you know Ferrari is no longer the Ferrari we once knew. Subscribe if you believe champions deserve more than excuses. The silence inside the Ferrari garage after Brazil wasn't just awkward, it was historic. While fans were still trying to understand what had forced Lewis Hamilton out of the race, Charles Leclerc sat quietly behind the screens, watching everything. What he saw wasn't just a mechanical failure. It was a total absence of responsibility from a team that had promised change but delivered confusion. That moment, silent and tense, became the spark for one of the biggest internal shifts in Ferrari's recent history. Because just days later, Leclerc did the unthinkable. He stood in front of Ferrari's leadership, the very team that raised him through their academy, the brand he had always defended, and told them he was ready to leave. This wasn't emotional. It was calculated. After watching how Hamilton's concerns were ignored, how performance problems were minimized, and how the press was spun instead of told the truth, Leclerc finally saw through the smoke. He wasn't going to wait for the same thing to happen to him. For Leclerc, Brazil was personal not because of where he finished, but because of what he witnessed. Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, had been sidelined without a fight. No new floor, no last-minute strategy pivot, no defense from the pit wall, just a quiet DNF and an even quieter response. That showed Leclerc everything he needed to know. If a legend like Hamilton could be treated like a footnote, then no one, not even a future world champion like himself, was truly safe. This wasn't the Ferrari he signed up for. Leclerc came into the team with passion and belief, not just in the red overalls, but in the project. He was told he would be the cornerstone of a rebuild. But year after year, he's been handed a car that underdelivers and a structure that refuses to evolve. And now, even with one of the most decorated drivers of all time in the garage next to him, the same cracks are still spreading. It's no longer about performance. It's about values, and Leclerc isn't willing to compromise his. What makes this moment explosive is the timing. Leclerc's public loyalty has always been unshakable. He's defended strategy failures, explained away development delays, and played the long game. But Brazil changed the rules. He saw Ferrari not just failing, but refusing to own their mistakes. And when he looked across the garage and saw Hamilton walking away with no answers, he realized it was only a matter of time before he'd be next. That's why this demand to leave isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough. For much of the season, Leclerc had been patient. He tolerated vague technical explanations, lived with aerodynamic inconsistencies, and gave the team the benefit of the doubt again. But under the surface, the cracks were growing. Throughout key race weekends, he began to notice something strange. Updates were arriving late, simulator data wasn't matching real-world results, and internal communications about setup adjustments were becoming unusually guarded. For a driver who lives by precision, this inconsistency was a warning sign. Then there was the engineering rotation. Ferrari, in an effort to restructure its technical department, began reassigning staff between driver crews. The result? Leclerc's feedback loops were disrupted, his preferred race engineer was frequently unavailable, and the car balance evolved in ways that didn't align with his driving style. Despite raising concerns, the answers never changed. It's a learning year, they said. We're gathering data. But Leclerc didn't need more data. He needed a car he could trust and a team that trusted his instincts. The real fracture came when he compared data from Hamilton's side of the garage. Although both drivers were supposedly running the same spec, Leclerc noticed variations in tire degradation and braking behavior that didn't correlate with his input. Even more concerning, telemetry comparisons suggested that Hamilton's car was being pushed toward a setup direction that prioritized high-speed balance, a trait that had already proven unstable at circuits like Brazil. Leclerc flagged it. The team ignored it. And when Hamilton's car failed just a few laps into the Grand Prix, Leclerc wasn't surprised, he was confirmed. That was the moment everything clicked. The team wasn't listening not to Hamilton, not to him. Technical decisions were being driven by internal deadlines, not by track reality. Leadership was protecting process, not performance. And worse, when failures happened, accountability evaporated. The handling of Hamilton's DNF in Sao Paulo wasn't just poor. It was clinical, no emotion, no clarity, no responsibility. That, more than any data point, told Leclerc the truth. Ferrari was more interested in managing image than managing progress. In private, Leclerc began distancing himself. He limited his media exposure. He declined certain debriefs. He asked his management to quietly explore options. For someone as loyal and brand-conscious as Leclerc, these were drastic moves. But they weren't reactive. They were strategic. Brazil wasn't an isolated disaster, it was the final confirmation of a pattern he had feared for 2 seasons. And now, with Hamilton experiencing the same collapse he once endured alone, Leclerc realized the risk of staying had finally outweighed the hope of rebuilding. When Lewis Hamilton's car rolled back into the garage in Brazil, broken and out of contention, no one expected the silence that followed. There were no immediate explanations, no statements from senior management, no urgency in finding answers. Just hushed voices, disconnected eyes, and a post-race briefing that felt more like a formality than a reckoning. For Charles Leclerc, who witnessed the entire sequence from the other side of the garage, that moment was louder than any team radio. It said, even legends can be left behind. To see Hamilton, the most accomplished driver of the modern era, treated with such detachment was jarring. Leclerc had spent years believing that Ferrari would rise to meet the level of its drivers, that once Hamilton arrived, the culture would shift. But Brazil exposed a different truth. The team hadn't adapted. If anything, it had regressed. And what shook Leclerc most wasn't the mechanical failure. It was the lack of defense. There was no stand taken for Hamilton. No apology. No sign that Ferrari recognized the weight of what had just happened. Leclerc knew that silence all too well. He had lived it in Monaco when strategy errors cost him a home podium, in Silverstone when tire calls shattered his chances, and in Spa when setup directions changed without his input. But back then, he rationalized it. He told himself it would improve. Now, seeing Hamilton, someone whose voice carries weight, be ignored in the same way, the illusion shattered. If they could leave Hamilton exposed, then anyone was vulnerable. The badge didn't protect you. Neither did the legacy. That realization transformed Leclerc. His disappointment turned into resolve. For the first time, he began to view Ferrari not as a project to fix, but as a system that might never be fixed. His loyalty had always been to the dream, the idea of returning Ferrari to glory. But the reality, cold and undeniable, was that glory wasn't coming under this leadership. Hamilton's abandonment was more than an error. It was a symbol. It was the moment Leclerc stopped waiting for things to change and started planning his way out. From that point forward, Leclerc became quieter in meetings, more guarded in media sessions, and sharper in private conversations. His engineers noticed. So did his management. He was still driving with everything he had, but the emotional tether to the team was gone. What remained was professionalism, not passion. And in Formula One, when a driver stops fighting for a team and starts fighting for himself, it's already too late. The energy changes, the chemistry breaks, and the garage becomes a stage for inevitable departure. The shift didn't begin with fireworks. It started with silence, calculated, intentional, and noticed by everyone paying attention. After Brazil, Charles Leclerc began skipping non-obligatory press briefings. No post-race smiles. No interviews explaining away the team's decisions. For a driver known for loyalty, that silence sent a clear signal. Something inside him had changed. And in Formula One, when a driver like Leclerc stops talking, it's not out of confusion. It's out of certainty. Then came the first public crack. During a quiet post-race interview with a European broadcaster, Leclerc was asked if he still believed in Ferrari's long-term vision. He didn't dodge. He didn't deflect. Instead, he answered with brutal calm, "There comes a point when belief needs to be matched with action." That quote hit the paddock like a lightning bolt. Suddenly, the whispers of internal conflict became headlines. The press wasn't speculating anymore, they were circling. Italian media erupted. Gazzetta dello Sport, usually cautious in its Ferrari coverage, ran with the headline, "Leclerc si stacca il cuore non basta. Leclerc is letting go. Heart is no longer enough." British and German outlets followed with their own angles, tying the growing unrest to Hamilton's abandonment in Brazil. Analysts pointed out the strategic incoherence, the one-sided development programs, the breakdown in communication between the pit wall and the drivers. Everyone saw it now. This wasn't a blip. It was systemic failure. Back in Maranello, the panic began. Ferrari's PR division scrambled to contain the fire. Internally, senior management drafted messages reinforcing unity, but the damage had been done. Engineers and staff, who had always looked to Leclerc as the emotional anchor of the team, now sensed detachment. One insider anonymously told the press, Charles always stayed late, always debriefed in detail. Now he's just present. Physically, yes, but emotionally, you can feel the distance. That quote confirmed what the fans already felt. Ferrari was losing more than a driver, they were losing the soul of their project. Social media amplified it all. Hashtags like Save Leclerc and Ferrari Fallout began trending. Fans, many of whom had stuck with the team through years of underperformance, now turned their frustration toward the leadership. Not because of the results, but because of the pattern. Drivers come with hope and leave with silence. The cycle keeps repeating. And this time, it wasn't just a promising rookie walking away. It was a generational talent, standing his ground with calm defiance.